Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. You know, Walmart and Wall Street are remarkably similar. They have the same sugar daddy, y'all. Walmart relies on cheap goods from China, and Wall Street relies on cheap money from China. And they've both been hit by chaos following free lunch glitches to the electronic welfare payments systems. At a Walmart in Louisiana, a glitch with the electronic food stamp card, the EBT cards, showed unlimited balances available to holders of the card. Shoppers stampeded and emptied the shelves of every last good available. On Wall Street, the Fed's quantitative easing to infinity is the EBT card for Wall Street, and it's showing an unlimited balance, which surely must be a glitch, right? And the banksters are stampeding and plundering the world of productive assets. In Louisiana, when the glitch was fixed, the Walmart shoppers abandoned shopping carts piled high with the toxic goods and so-called food that they could not afford without the free lunch of an unlimited EBT. The same thing will happen on Wall Street. Bankers will abandon giant piles of CDOs, of toxic assets, and so-called wealth they too cannot afford without the free money of unlimited QE. Am I getting this correct, Stacy Herbert?
That was a good summary there. Now, I think we should actually rename Wall Street, get rid of one of those L's. And there is a remarkable similarity between the two, especially how they rely on cheap goods and cheap money from China. Now, the story you're talking about in Louisiana happened in Spring Hill, Louisiana and Mansfield, Louisiana. And the headline is, "Shopping Chaos Ensues in Louisiana Walmart Stores After EBT Cards Stop Showing Credit Limits." So you can look at this video here taken from inside the shop, and you see that the shelves were emptied, completely emptied, as people piled high because they could buy as much as they wanted and they purchased. But when the system came back online, they abandoned just shopping carts filled with foods and other goods from Walmart that they just abandoned there.
Yes, like an abandoned civilization, or the aftermath of the Jim Jones massacre in the jungle where they were all drinking Kool-Aid. But, you know, Walmart is the prototypical American success story. The Walmart family, the richest family in the world probably, made their bones by convincing the government to pay for the salaries of their employees, and to pay the underwriters subsidize, essentially, the employees that are unable to survive on a Walmart wage. So this is the perfect example of the plutocracy in America, the kleptocracy in America in action.
So here the consumer thought they were getting free lunch. So they piled high and then they abandoned the baskets. So the local news asked others who witnessed this what they thought. One patron said the chaos was a normal reaction to the prospect of free food. We see this all the time. We see this on Wall Street, as you compared it to in the beginning of the show. Here they're given free money, and what do but consume every single productive asset you could possibly find on earth, driving up the prices, extracting the equity, because they're given free money to do that. Stan Garcia, another shopper, said it was just plain theft. That's stealing, he said. That's all I got to say about it. The fact is, these guys were using their EBT cards, electronic benefit transfer cards, which record what they purchase. So all they were doing is bringing forward consumption from other months, which presumably they'll be deducted from. So there was no free lunch. They thought they were getting free lunch, but you see the thought that they were getting free lunch created a misallocation of their free lunch money.
I think we need to return to the top of the show and the comparison to Wall Street and Walmart. Yeah. Because the free money at Walmart drives distortions in the marketplace. The free money on Wall Street drives distortions in the marketplace. So the price, for example, of homes in London or the price of the homes in New York are hitting all-time highs. That's not because of inflation. That's not because of working its way through in terms of higher wages and everything that usually is associated with classic inflation. It's because of price distortion. These prices are distorted because of free money. So when the bankers on Wall Street are buying a house for $100 million in the city of Manhattan, they are acting as a kissing cousin to the EBT transfer wealth payments system of a guy on Walmart buying into a box of Twinkies with his EBT card. Those two are similarly pulling at the seams of the system. They both are benefiting from this free money system that is ripping apart the economy in America and leading to the dollar's ultimate demise.
Yes, and it's a misallocation of capital. I assume that those persons in Walmart were misallocating their capital as well, probably buying stuff that they wouldn't normally buy with their limited funds in order to get as much nutrition as possible, but they probably misallocated it. Now you bring up the dollar, and they're the equivalent to the EBT card, the equivalent to quantitative easing, the equivalent to this free lunch has been something America has enjoyed for decades. And that's the exorbitant privilege. You can call that the EBT card of the global economy. And this exorbitant privilege is the United States able to print dollars and basically get free goods, pile up their Walmart carts with free goods from the rest of the world, free oil, free goods, free services, and they get to live off that. The sun is setting on dollar supremacy and with it, American power. This is the Telegraph, and they're saying that, you know, this craziness going on in the Capitol Hill in Congress and whether or not they want to go bankrupt and default. Well, just like in the comments section on the article about the Walmart shoppers, there's so much hatred and racism and classism there. Well, the same reason why the US dollar is about to be ditched, you see the same hatred for the freeloaders of America. Rarely before has international dissatisfaction with the dollar's role as reserve currency to the world been as great as it is now. The most visible anger comes from China, with more than $3 trillion of dollar foreign exchange reserves, 1.3 trillion of them held in US treasuries. For ordinary Chinese, it has come as a revelation to discover they own so much American debt. That they own it in a country which, because of political brinkmanship, may actually default has provoked understandable fury.
Yes, another fractal insight by Stacy Herbert. If I get your point, you're saying that the hatred spewed on the users of the EBT cards at Walmart from the privileged class in America that is the recipient of EBT from the Federal Reserve is analogous now, or played out in a parallel sense, but in a macro sense, by the hatred now spewing out of China toward America. Because America has this privilege, this exorbitant privilege of printing US dollars to pay for stuff. When America imports that oil from Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, when it buys all that stuff from China, it uses a currency that itself prints. That's how you get to $17 trillion in national debt. That's how you get to $200 trillion of unfunded liabilities. Because people take dollars that are being printed that have no intrinsic value, other than the military. I mean, that's, if you ask the smart people like Paul Craig Roberts or others, they'll say that the only thing backing the dollar, including Dr. Michael Hudson has said this, are the war machine, is the U.S. Pentagon. And we saw this in Saddam Hussein. He wanted to go to euros, they killed him. Iran wanted to go to euros with oil and gas, there's an embargo. And you see this played out around the world. If you decide you want to get out of the dollar matrix, the American military will come and kill you. But now that's all breaking apart, and we see the consequences.
The U.S. military bases around the world will be the equivalent of the abandoned Walmart carts once the dollar is no longer the reserve currency.
Yes! Yes, that's it! You've nailed it! You're on fire! You've got it! That's right! All these tanks and ships abandoned. Like all those SUVs abandoned in Doha.
Well, so right now we don't know, as we record this, whether or not the U.S. has defaulted, whether it's decided to default or it's going to just pull it out at the last minute. But, you know, they point out in this article that the problem is that everyone can only look on in horror as the U.S. decides to commit economic suicide. It's like they've strapped on a suicide vest as an economy.
They're suicide bankers.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for years. Yeah. They're suicide bankers. They're banking jihadis. They strap on the bonds, they pull the plug, and it blow up the world for their ideology of market fundamentalism. They're terrorists. They're financial terrorists. I've been saying this for years. Now it's finally true. People understand it. People in China say, wait a minute, we've invested in financial terrorists on Wall Street? Woo, I want my yuan back.
Well, it's also because these people are all on the equivalent of EBT cards, whether it's quantitative easing on Wall Street, EBT cards at Walmart or the exorbitant privilege transfer mechanism from the rest of the world to the United States. And that's the important point here, because they point out that more than 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars, which also account for more than 80% of global foreign exchange trading. The dollar's hegemony is all pervasive. This has given the greenback a degree of leverage unmatched by any other reserve currency in history. So right now they're in a situation where they won't pay rather than that they can't pay, because the way the system is set up, they can just print money. It's the unlimited balance EBT card for real at this point. And just like, however, when those people at Walmart realized that this was a glitch and that it might be corrected at one point, they went crazy and got as much as they could. I think you see that same action in America. I think they hear what Russia, what China, what Brazil, what India, what all these other nations are saying about getting off the US dollar, and they're doing the same thing. That's why they're grabbing every single thing they can, while they still have the free dollar exorbitant privilege.
Just before this shutdown took place, the Pentagon loaded up on billions and billions of dollars of war toys. Yeah. The exact same thing as a Walmart shopper putting 50 or 60 cartons of Twinkies in their basket. But I think the whole thing can be summed up with two television shows, Downton Abbey and Boardwalk Empire, which both take place at roughly the same time, except that on Downton Abbey, the British rule as world reserve currency is ending. And all those people like Lady Mary and others are crying about their lost empire. Whereas in America, you've got Steve Buscemi at Boardwalk Empire, and they're on the cusp of the American century. And they're gangsters. And that gangsterism that informed America's rise during the 20th century is reaching its climax now with the rise of the banksters and the suicide bankers on Wall Street, who have now decided, instead of going quietly into history like Lady Mary and Downton Abbey and Lord Grantham, they're going to blow this frickin' world apart because they're psychos.
Well, finally, David Bloom from HSBC says that in the event of a default, actually what will happen, because it's so pervasive and there's so many different maturities of all these bonds that are the backbone of the global financial system, it actually could be a situation like what Jim Rickards says, is that they could just phase in the SDR as the US dollar bonds become, expire.
That's right. James Rickards says SDR will be phased in. They'll see it first, they'll start trading oil in SDRs and not the dollar. And that'll be the official end of the dollar.
Yes, so it could be a smoother transition than the chaos that happened in these Walmart shops down in Louisiana.
Of course, they could choose Bitcoin. That would be my first choice. All right, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Stay tuned for the second half, a whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Alasdair Macleod of goldmoney.com. Alasdair, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
It's my pleasure, Max.
Okay, Alasdair, on Friday, the 11th of October at 8:42 a.m., someone sold $640 million worth of gold in one large block. How many tons was it, and why would someone sell in such a manner?
I understand it was about 80 tons. In terms of normal trading in the market, it makes no sense whatsoever. If you've got a large order, you do it carefully so as to not disturb the market. Whereas in this case, it seems it was deliberately designed to push the market down. So for whatever reason that is, I mean, we're not privy to it, we don't know, but it seems that it was a deliberate takedown in the market.
Okay, so isn't this a form of what we call price propaganda? In other words, or on Wall Street, I remember when I was a broker, we had something called painting the tape or banging the close, where you're pushing the price around to send a message to other players in the market. Isn't it just a case of somebody trying to encourage other sellers into the marketplace? There's no real fundamental or economic reason for this to take place, especially given the backdrop of increased central bank intervention and bond crisis and currency crisis, correct?
Yes, it's a standard market maker's practice. If they see that their stops or stop orders, as it were, on a fall, they can think, well, we can take those out by banging the market.
But let's put this in perspective for a second, because let's talk about the global gold supply. versus the demand in China and a size, an order of this size to give people an idea, because it's not just about an over-the-counter market maker banging some $5 stock at the close to create some price propaganda, as I call it. This is really something, given the, looking in the perspective of global gold demand. You just mentioned, you were talking a little about the China gold demand, and see what people see, put this into context.
Yeah, it's completely disconnected from the physical market, which is quite extraordinary. I mean, it is as if the capital markets in the West are living in a bubble of their own, completely divorced from reality. The fact is that from April, when they first banged the market below $1,400, demand for gold in Asia took off. It was already threatening to buy up every single ounce produced by non-Chinese, non-Russian, non-Uzbekistani mines. And now we have a situation where that demand has accelerated. And China alone, by my calculations, just looking at the Shanghai Gold Exchange deliveries and Hong Kong and netting out the cross business, so this is a minimum figure, China has actually this year taken out an annualized 2,600 tons. If it continues at the same rate that it has so far this year, it will be 2,600 tons at the end of this year. If you take China's gold production out of the world total, which is roughly 440 tons, we're left with 2,260 tons. And Chinese demand alone is 2,600 tons. I mean, you know, someone must be supplying this. And this really is the conundrum which we don't have a clear answer to, though we have suspicions. I mean, for a start, if you look at the other holders of the stock of gold, which is roughly 165,000 tons of gold in existence above ground, most of those are long-term holders. Most of them are already in Asia, actually, and they're not sellers on a shakeout driven by futures in the United States or by the LBMA in London in the forward markets. They're basically firm holders. If anything, on the margins, they probably acquire more. And certainly at Gold Money, that's been our experience. I mean, the vast majority of people we hold gold in custody for are basically people who are insuring against systemic risk. And that is the position, really, of virtually everybody who seriously owns gold. So when you bang the price, you don't shake out these guys. They're not sort of will-o'-the-wisp ETF holders.
Day traders.
Day traders, anything like that. We're talking about seriously locked up gold, and something really fundamental has to happen to change that.
Well, there seems to be an accounting fraud going on, because the central banks, who are large holders of gold, end up leasing it out to the bullion banks, and they keep it on their books as still good deliverable gold, because that's an accounting figure that they've got gold that they have yet to deliver, that they've loaned out. But the bullion banks have sold it. The bullion banks end up selling it to the East. You said on this show, you coined the phrase pretty much on this show recently, that gold is moving from west to east. And since you've said that on the show, it's become a meme. Everyone seems to understand what's going on here. So it has to do with the dollar, doesn't it, Alasdair? They want to create confusion and doubt about the alternatives to the dollar, because the dollar is the world reserve currency. It's backed up by the U.S. military, and the U.S. is in jeopardy of losing its empire. And so gold is really the antithesis of this. But what about the dollar itself? What state is it in? And you have a new metric, right, to measure the money supply. So tell us about that.
Yes, I was not happy with the existing metrics, M1, M0, M3, and so on and so forth. Really what I wanted was to construct some sort of measure which would define the difference between sound money and fiat currency. And I came up with the fiat money quantity.
Fiat money quantity, the
FMQ.
FMQ.
Yes,
okay.
Another acronym for everybody
Fine,
to
FMQ.
remember.
Take it away,
Yes,
FMQ.
absolutely. Right. Basically what it is it's the sum total of all the deposits in the system plus cash. And the
cash defined as?
Cash defined as folding notes in your pocket,
okay,
as it were. Okay. Now, the reason or the logic behind this is that when we first went to banks, going back a long time ago, we had gold which we used as money. We deposited that gold in the bank, and the bank would issue their notes, which we now call, you know, dollars or whatever. Or alternatively, what they would do is they would credit an account showing that they hold so much gold for us. Now, they started expanding credit on the back of that. And eventually what happened was that they set up central banks to try and control the problems of that expansion of credit.
Well, this is the beginning of fractional reserve banking.
Absolutely.
The goldsmiths,
Absolutely.
the gold bank, going back hundreds of years, they would lend out more gold than they had in the vaults and became a fractional reserve. And then we inherited that today with the central banks and the various banks.
And then the central bank started doing exactly the same thing. So what they did was they took the gold, which had been deposited with the banks within their system, and took it on board themselves against their monopoly, which they gained, of issuing the notes. So the banks lost the note issuing facility. That was transferred to the central bank, and the central bank took all our gold. So it went from you and me through to our bank and then into the central bank. So we need to come up with a metric that reflects all the deposits that have been created as part of that process, along with the cash. And this is the basis of FMQ. And the thing that's interesting about it is that by including the bank accounts, if you like, that the banks in the system have with the Fed, which is what excess reserves and reserves are, what we're doing is we're producing a metric which quite clearly, from the Lehman crisis, has taken off into hyperinflation.
Let's hear some numbers.
Right. It should be, at the moment, round about 7.5 trillion if it was following the trend that had been established all the way back from about 1960. And by the way, it followed that quite closely up until the Lehman crisis. Since then, it has taken off, and we're close to 12 trillion. So there is a gap of something over 4.5 trillion between where it should be and where it is. Now, that gives you an idea of how much trouble the system has got itself into. Can we contract deposits by 4.5 trillion? I don't think so. I don't think that's on anyone's agenda. And if it was attempted to try and slow down the rate of deposit creation, you would merely bring about a crisis in the banks.
So you're saying the
crisis
collateral
of confidence in the dollar as well.
You're saying that the collateral that backs up global money supply, which is ultimately gold, is even more encumbered by the tune of $4 to $5 trillion, right? So you're saying that the basis upon which it all goes back to gold, no matter how many people argue against it. We've been on a gold standard for 5,000 years.
Yeah.
The fact is, we're on a gold standard now. It's just that people fail to recognize it.
Gold is driven out of circulation.
Yeah, but nevertheless, central banks rely on it. They still trade it back and forth, and it's still the measure upon which anyone who is doing a transaction would refer back to if they're serious about that transaction.
It comes with no one's liability.
It's still there. It's not in circulation, as you call it. So there's a $4 trillion gap looking at these numbers. And of course, there's more funny money in the system than people even horrifyingly would imagine.
Yeah.
Now,
as defined by deposits, that's the key thing. What we're looking at is deposits. We're looking at, if we were to reverse the creation of fiat money back to gold, what actually has to be done? And we're talking about finding a home for 12 trillion of deposits.
Yeah, okay. Well, Jim Rickards has been on the show, smart guy. He talks about going back to a gold-backed security and clearing all these liabilities. You'd have to get to gold between $7,000 and $10,000 an ounce to make the equivalent of all the funny money in the system. So these are the numbers that you at goldmoney.com are also positing could be where this is all heading. When the fiat money system collapses, we go to a gold standard. You've got to clear those trades against something. Gold, and therefore gold goes to a lot. But I want to jump to something for a second, because recently, and we interviewed Professor Fekete. He said that the Fed's money creation was causing deflation. You wanted to use some of this interview to disagree with him. Go ahead.
Yeah. What he is saying, if I can put words in his mouth, is that the US economy, and indeed all other economies, most other economies in the developed world, is in serious difficulty, and there is a tendency for it to come in on itself. Now, this is because there has been a build-up of malinvestments, if you like, investment in production of things people don't really want, but government has decided that we should want.
So, malinvestment,
yeah, absolutely.
Driven by low interest rates.
Exactly. Now, again, and I'm putting words in his mouth, which is very unfair.
I'll be his proxy.
You'll be his proxy.
I agree with him. I'm on his side, so I'm his proxy. We're in this pitched battle, the inflation-deflation debate, part 57,000, which has been raging for 5 years. You're taking the inflation side. We only have a minute left, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, very, very quickly, I can sum it up in one phrase.
Yeah.
The Fed's primary function is to stop prices falling. It must ensure that prices rise. That is its
Yeah, but
self-appointed
it has
function.
failed.
Well,
They have failed, and you've got implosion. You've got Cyprus
Yeah.
implosion. Let me give you an example of this. Okay, Walmart, because of the low interest rates, which you just said caused malinvestment, you've got companies like Walmart who, with these low interest rate environments, with this disinflationary environment, are buying back their own stock instead of raising wages for employees, which would cause inflation. So there's a classic, perfect example.
well, that's a balance sheet effect. I mean,
But the balance sheet's where these two things collide.
Yes.
Okay, if I'm earning the cash for Walmart and I see I can borrow money at 0% interest rates, and I don't want to raise wages on employees, which would be the classic definition of inflation, but instead I'm going to go in malinvestment. I'm going to invest in my own company stock, which is being subsidized by the government, which sells unsustainable relationship with China, which is probably going to go the way of the dodo when this is all said and done. That's a deflationary event. But we're out of time, so I win. You have to come back soon.
I will have to, yes.
All right, we're out of time. But Alasdair Macleod, thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
That's my pleasure, Max.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Alasdair Macleod, of the wonderful goldmoney.com, which you should go check out. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.